Hey there guys, I'm the Bearded Devil. Welcome to my channel. Alright, so, been trying to make this video for a week now. More so, but unfortunately I have to do this super late, so I don't have much of a choice. We're going to continue going through the video between Ask Yourself and the Canadian Libertarian Party leader Tim Moen, I believe, Moen. Anyway, I don't know how you Canucks pronounce last names, but yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, I'm just fucking with y'all. Anyway, now last we had seen, mind you, it was only like what, 7 minutes worth at least. It was a little bit more than that, but I wanted to back it up that way. We're back into the groove. But I mean, so far, and I want you to notice something. You can rewatch this again, even up to this point. One of the things that you'll notice that Isaac has done is he doesn't make sense. And hear me out. All right. When asked about plants, he was unambiguous. He's straight up, not sentient, kill them all. Right? No moral dilemma involved in that, right? When asked about humans who are in a state of non-sentience, kill them all, there's nothing wrong with it. Right? For him, doesn't matter. When asked about animals who are non-sentient, it becomes a gray area. Why the fuck is that? It's not a gray area for people. It's not a gray area for plants. Why the fuck would it be a gray area for animals? When you put out the criteria, it's got to have a brain and a centralized nervous system. There are animals that don't have brains or centralized nervous systems. They have, or some way to interpret the data into a subjective reality. Just like plants and humans that are afflicted with either disease or some kind of damage that has caused the central processing area to be destroyed or deformed to the point of uselessness. And of course, plants don't have brains, so there you go. Why was it ambiguous with animals, but not with humans or plants? I just want to make sure you understand that. You guys understand that. That's precisely what he said. You can rewatch it all you want. It's not gonna go away. So why? What was? Do you know why? I mean, so far as I can tell, he doesn't have a reason to do that, except to what? Say it's okay to kill people but not animals? I don't understand. Oh, because he's a vegan. He's an ethical vegan. And when his ethics rely upon, especially his argument relies upon consistency, then he doesn't want to he can't sit there and say that animals don't have rights or they don't have moral value based upon the distinction of the fact that a trait exists between humans and animals that degrades both humans and animals. Degrades the moral value. To him. Sentience, if you remove it in humans, he has no compunction, no problem with slitting a human's throat. He would view it no more different than mowing the lawn. Okay. Now he can always argue that he would find it somehow wrong, but it wouldn't be based off of sentience. He may say it's repulsive. What makes it repulsive? It's the whole thing. You can't sit there and go, well, all of these other things and not somehow none of these relate to moral value, or the reasons why we give certain things moral value and other things we don't. But You can't sit there and say that, oh, well, yeah, humans that aren't sentient, kill them all. Fuck it. Fuck it. Animals? Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe it's a gray area. We're not sure. I'd rather just go ahead and side on, you know, be a little more cautious and just go ahead and say that, oh, fuck it. No animal can, no. Nah, dude, you don't get to play that game. You can't be on the fence about an animal that doesn't have a brain or centralized nervous system. It has no way to perceive reality in a subjective manner, and then be completely and absolutely unambiguous when it comes to plants and humans, as far as non-sentience is concerned. So, anyway, Isaac, go fuck yourself. Go ahead. I double, triple fucking dog dare you to bitch, moan, and complain about that analysis. All you have to do is just sit there and say, hey, it's not a gray area, or it is. Or it's either gray area all around, or it's not. You don't get to play favorites here. Anywho, let's continue.
Also add in there the extra kind of complexity of whether you from libertarianism is all about it's kind of an attitudinal disposition of skepticism towards moral claims about the use of force, and institutionalizing those claims as well, right? And so our conception of rights is one of negative rights, like you have a right to be left alone, essentially, but no one else has an obligation to do things for you or to provide you with things necessarily. So
I'm not really going to go into the political aspect of this. I'm not one for politics. At least that's not the purpose of this particular persona. But what he said there, he's going to quantify it. Saying that you're not obligated to help people, but you're obligated to not hurt them. Okay, that's the way it goes. In essence, that doesn't necessarily create a cooperative society. If you really want to know, we have. I mean, if that's the case, then no, not getting into it. But he's going to quantify the whole "you're not obligated to help someone" thing. But again, I'm not trying to focus on the politics of it. Just Isaac's particular discussion strategy.
So you could make an argument that there's that the person lying there on life support doesn't necessarily that no one has an obligation necessarily to provide them the means of life unless they've taken on a freely chosen kind of positive obligation. In other words, I'm a healthcare provider. I'm taking on a duty, a positive obligation to the people in my care, and so I can't unplug someone if there's
someone felt obligated towards that individual who is in that particular state by bringing them to a doctor. And they weren't necessarily a healthcare provider. Just saying. That would be like saying that I'm not obligated to help my child who is dying of cancer, or a family member, or even a stranger. This is you don't need to help them. They can help themselves. Like I said, I don't want to really go into the politics of it, because that particular point of view is saying that you don't have to do. No human has to do anything except have a heartbeat and breathe the air. Outside of that, well, I need, of course, but basics, fundamental. The same thing as any other animal. Everything every other animal does, we kind of need that. as far as like the breadth of width of living, width and breadth of living. Anyway, but fuck it. I'm not getting into the politics. I'm not getting into politics.
There's a hope for them to survive. So just want to clarify the thinking there. But
100%, yeah. So I'll just
basically, Timmy Boy said that if they're gonna die, or you're not obligated to not pull the plug. But if you choose, anyway, he's rationalizing. He doesn't know it, but yes, he's rationalizing murdering another human being. Whether or not you're doing it, and this is one of the reasons why patients that are in a comatose state, where basically they're dead, the only thing that's keeping the body alive is through life support, which is literally why it's called life support. Lights are off, nobody's home. That's pretty much it. And it's okay to go ahead. And this is now there are stages of brain death. There is just being comatose, which means you have possibly some like something registers on the brain scan, something that says, hey, you're something's there. It may not be enough to consider that person conscious. Okay. Typically they do tests. They unplug a person. They literally just take them off life support for a determined amount of time to see if the body continues to do the processes that are normal to it, such as breathing and spontaneous heartbeat. And they do this. Okay, and they repeatedly check. They have to do this. This is literally what doctors must do in order to confirm whether or not someone has reached true brain death. There's no ambiguity about it. There's no possible chance in hell that person is actually alive anymore. Okay? Basically the body's alive, but the body's dead. The only reason why it's even remotely doing the things it's doing is because you have something keeping the heart beating and the lungs moving. But there has to be some kind of a determination for that. And then they have criteria for that. And this is why they just don't go ahead and unplug everybody and say, fuck it. Or they don't just turn around, put a bolt gun to those people's heads and slit their throats. They got to make sure first. I mean, it's just a dead body being kept in a pseudo quasi life, or I guess a quasi pseudo life, however you want to look at it. Anyway, but basically it's a dead body that just happens to be functional for a purpose of keeping the organs alive. Anyway, and even then you go into things like organ donations and all that kind of jazz. The doctors can't just cut you open. They have to have consent. They have to have your prior consent, i.e. being an organ donor. They have to have some kind of consent from the family, if there is a family. And if there isn't a family, they have to get a court order. They have to find something. They have to find some loophole in which you were never a donor. They have to pretty much put it where you were never, that you were a donor at one point in time, that you had done anything. They have to find some way to actually justify going in and taking your organs, things like that. That's just how it is. But beyond that, there is, of course, like I said, there's all of that criteria. It's not just, hey, looky, let's just go ahead and unplug it. What happens if there's nothing to unplug? If there's nothing to unplug, then let's hear it. That's why Isaac uses the unplugged defense. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, because it's minimized. It's a minimized rationality. That's it. Well, rationalization, sorry. I played this game before, guys. I know how they operate. Sorry.
Just clear up a little on my politics here. We won't go too far into this, but I largely agree with libertarians. So I'm all about, you know,
He literally is supposed to be going into the politics of it. Should libertarians be vegan? That is the title of his video, right? Oh, discussing veganism, leader of... Oh, shoot. Well, I could have sworn that he went into it. Oh, yeah, here we go. Should libertarians go vegan? See, I knew that. So, not necessarily in his title, but nonetheless in his description.
you know, swing your fists as much as you want, just don't hit anyone else with it. I think that that's a very safe principle. Now, I think that when you're talking about positive and negative rights, I think every reasonable person is on board with negative rights. If you're not on board with negative rights, you are at the periphery of society as some kind of insane person.
No. Well, no, I say no because when the blanket statements, admittedly, Isaac, if you ever wanted to go into politics, you would almost stand chance, if not for people being able to call you out on your bullshit. Okay? Blanket statements like someone's on the periphery if they don't believe in negative rights for people. Well, no one says you have to. That doesn't. If that's the case, then everyone would be on the periphery and on some issue. For you, that issue is, of course, whether or not a human being is sentient. You would be on the periphery. You are on the periphery when it comes to that. So please, please don't sit here and act like every scenario is quantified by your little statement. It's not. I'm pretty sure you could think of a few other situations in which another human being's negative rights would be justifiably violated. Just saying. Or at the very least, there would be no moral quandary as to the removal of those rights. It wouldn't be necessarily a question of it being right or wrong. It would just be what it is. But whatever.
I mean, everyone agrees that you don't have a right to go and just rape someone or murder someone. You don't have a right to infringe on them. Now, you know, positive rights, the notion that someone...
Except for him, he thinks it's okay to rape and murder little children that are born without brains. A birth defect, something they have no control over. But he's cool, he's okay with it. Go ahead. It would be just like making a salad. That's the moral equivalency in his head.
actually has a duty or obligation to you beyond just not infringing with you, like to provide you a good or service. Now, I actually do diverge from you there. I support a kind of minimal positive rights model, and we could get into that and probably argue about that stuff, but we definitely agree completely on...
Anytime he does that, anytime he makes that particular gesture, vocalization, and kind of mannerisms in which he says, well, you know, we can get into that, he doesn't really want to get into it. It's a way, it's a tactic, it's an easy tactic. When you do it in such a way where it seems to be something that's it's not really important. So, you know, we could go into it, but I mean, it's really not relevant, blah blah blah. That's what it is. These are simple tactics done by many people during discussions. You wanna kind of push a certain point of view, and you don't really want to go into beyond what you're trying to talk about. The easiest thing to do is to minimize and to make it frivolous. It's frivolous. It's, you know, you don't really need to talk about it. But if you want to talk about it, you know. I had way too many arguments with my first ex-wife that ended up in that particular kind of direction. I'm sorry, but yeah, you know. You're not bringing anything new to the table that most people haven't really heard. The only thing is most people aren't paying attention to it, and your followers certainly aren't paying attention to it. But you know, that's why I'm here, because I'm an asshole and you're a fuckwit.
On negative rights need to be on the table, and veganism, luckily, follows from negative rights. So the question of accepting positive rights or not would actually be irrelevant to the discussion of whether you should be vegan. The only thing that would be relevant is just negative rights.
Sure.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, I want you to notice how many questions that Tim asks and Isaac answers. He answers in such a way where not just the fact that he answers them, but the way in which he answers them. Typically, any of the questions Tim have kind of given to Isaac have been more or less brushed off. They've been deflected in a different direction, or he'll do this, and he'll bring up we can discuss this shtick a little bit later on. I'm almost guaranteed, because that's what he does. At every single argument he's ever had, when it comes to an area in which he's not very comfortable with, or that puts into his own shit into question, suddenly, we can, but why would we need to? And he brushes it off. But let's go.
So I mean, that is the general case. So if you can't actually, if you agree that the humans have this basic right, in this case,
except for non-sentient humans, just make sure you don't ever quantify that. So you might as well. And if you don't quantify it, then come on, help yourself out, dude. Just for once, just say it out loud. Say it. The non-sentient human holocaust is completely and absolutely justifiable. Go ahead, dude. Go ahead, say it.
I'm framing it as a right to the NAP just because that's a philosophical concept that I assume you'll be on board with. I usually just say something like a right to moral value or moral consideration. But if you're going to say humans have
moral value and moral consideration are technically two different things. Moral value is, of course, those rights that he likes to talk about. Those negative rights, right not to be murdered, raped, tortured, exploited, enslaved, all kinds of things. Moral consideration is the degree in which you place whether or not you literally consider those things of value. But whatever. Even if he says, oh, you're supposed to have moral consideration. Why? Because you have moral value. You get it?
Have a right to the NAP, to that kind of consideration.
Except for non-sentient humans. Those poor little babies.
Then there's nothing true of animals that, if true of humans, would justify denying them that consideration, denying them the NAP.
Except for sentience, because, non-sentient humans, non-sentient animals. But somehow it's okay to kill the non-sentient humans, but it's a gray area with the animals, right? Right, Isaac?
Then you could change every single thing true of the animal, or true of the human, which would actually render it identical to the animal, and you'd be simultaneously...
No! Fucking ads! Let me skip it.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
Let's suppose I'm not.
Simultaneously saying it does and doesn't deserve the NAP. So it would actually reduce down to a contradiction unless there's a way to spell out some fun...
Whoa. Wait a second. Hold on. Let me back that up a smidge, because we're missing something. I want to hear him repeat that and then fuck himself up with it.
Identical to the animal, and you'd be simultaneously saying it does and doesn't deserve the NAP. So it would actually reduce down to a contradiction unless there's a way to spell out some fundamental difference there. So
Isaac likes to put in this particular bit when it comes to his name the trait. Like one of his explanations, how it's the does and doesn't kind of shit, right? Here's the thing, Isaac. If you can claim that humans are moral value, right, you cannot then claim that humans are not of moral value. You're are and aren't of moral value. According to you, that's a contradiction. Because you cannot have both simultaneously, right? You can't say that humans are moral value, and then there aren't of moral value. And that's the whole. And you set yourself up for your own contradiction with even by in some sophist reasoning that plants are not a moral value. Humans are and are not of moral value. And animals are never not of moral value. I know it's a fucking double negative, but nonetheless, you see where it's at. you see where this all goes, right? If you don't, you're a fucking moron. Why does no one ever actually listen to the words you say and how you say them? I don't understand that. Why nobody fucking goes, oh, well, you know.
And sorry, why wouldn't that apply to plant life as well?
Well, it would if you couldn't name the difference. Now, I would name the difference sentience, consciousness.
I have another video coming soon, kids. Just to let you know, we're going to talk about this little portion. But we'll continue on for this one right now. I've got that other one in the works.
Subjective experience. So I think just like a brain dead person, if a being is actually not conscious, not perceiving, and like you said, has no potential of it, then it does not have any kind of rights. It doesn't have negative rights.
Right. And so I would...
It doesn't have any kind of rights. It doesn't have any kind of negative rights. Interesting. Cue the baby Holocaust, kids. Cue the Holocaust. You know. You can go off into the philosophical zombies if you want, but insert whatever. But in the end, take away the philosophical zombies, you just have a child. Born with a defect. No consciousness. Can't feel pain. I mean, granted, they can't feel pain. They have no subjective reality. The whole 9 yards. Everything that vegans classify as being sentient, they don't have. Isaac has no problem slitting their throats. They don't have any rights. It's okay. Do it. Right? Just,
would say that to me the distinction isn't just sentience, that it's rational thought, the ability to form concepts. The thing that separates humans from the rest of life on Earth is that we live through our volition, not through just kind of instinct, I guess. We're able to plan ahead, form concepts, think about, and that sort of thing. So isn't this just kind of, you're drawing the line around sentience, I'm drawing it around rational thought, the ability to form concepts. Why one versus the other, I guess?
Okay. I'm going to make a quick prediction. Isaac is going to take the rational argument. He's going to bring in retards. Or children, or whatever, right? He's going to bring them in and say, well, you wouldn't be okay with killing retards, right? Because they can't form rational concepts, yada, yada, yada. Because that's his go-to argument. Right? That is his go-to response to those kind of questions. Let's see how predictable the motherfucker is. I would bet my fucking house.
I would actually argue you're probably not doing that. I mean, if we take someone who's sufficiently mentally retarded,
I knew it.
Solve problems.
Oh fuck! You are so fucking predictable. I'm gonna stop it right here, guys. I'm gonna continue on with this later. I told myself I would limit this to only about a half an hour. But yeah, Oh, God, Isaac, you are literally, and you're not the only one. There are countless vegans that have the exact same stock answers, that don't really go. And all it is just you're just. It's an argument from marginal cases. No matter what he fucking says, no matter every single time he fucking uses an argument, he's using the reductio ad absurdum mixed with the argument from marginal cases. Right? That's it. That's all he's doing. Sprinkled in with some golden rule shit. Okay, that's his argument in a nutshell. I realize the NTT is there, and of course, I've seen I think he's a vegan. I can't remember, but he basically, it's just that argument has already gone to Isaac's head. The name trait has technically gone through Isaac's head, and he couldn't name a trait, so therefore, vegan. And any trait that you name causes that ends up being consistent. You can name a few traits that aren't consistent that he unfortunately would have to agree with because of his own where he places value. So say if somebody said, yeah, okay, sentience. Just say if I said sentience. Say if I conditionally agreed with the first premise. And then I said sentience. And he said, fuck, you're right. Well, because he can't say that. Well, yes, that would be morally consistent because that's the way he sees things. That would be something that removes moral value for a human being. So the only thing is that also means that it invalidates the first premise. You know that, right? When you name a trait that's consistent, it presents no contradiction, it invalidates the first premise. It causes it to be untrue. That means you end up disagreeing with it. That's the whole point. You agree to something and then you spend the rest of the fucking time trying to disagree with the first premise. So if you say sentience, and then he says, well, there aren't really any non-sentient. That's when he starts going with the gray area bullshit. Suddenly, there's no animal that's not sentient. Or he'll change it up. Say, okay, well, we're talking about sentient beings. So how does that work? Saying, oh, we're talking about sentient beings. Okay, so sentient beings are a moral value. There is no trait that sentient beings. There's no trait absent in sentient beings, which if absent in sentient beings would cause sentient beings to consider themselves valueless. See where that goes? It's stupid. So trying to change animals into sentient beings, that doesn't help you. You're a sentient being. You're also an animal. Take your pick. Anyway, I've got a whole nother video for that one in particular. But if you did name sentience, and you agreed with the kind of the vegan perspective when it comes to that if it has sentience, it has value. If it's non-sentient, there is no value at all. It's value. It's worthless. Then technically you could, because there are animals, of course, that don't have brains, don't have central nervous systems, and cannot experience a subjective reality. Just as much as there are humans in similar conditions. You can't play that game, man. You can't. It's moving. You're moving the goalposts. You're reinterpreting shit. Anyway, and then of course that leads into, there's no contradiction. Therefore, animals don't have rights. They don't have moral value based upon something like that. And then you'll sit there and move the goalposts again and say, well, and it's about the NTT. It has nothing to do with anything in reality of whether or not animals should and shouldn't have rights. It's not a matter of. It's not even a thing. The NTT is simply, as he continuously puts it, a consistency test to see if your morals, within your moral framework or whatever the hell, but if you defeat it and it's not and he can't reduce it to anything that's absurd, what happens? That suddenly the vegan movement will cease to exist? No, obviously not. Because the actual that's it. That's all it boils down to. It's one tool in your fucking toolkit, and unfortunately for Isaac, it's the only tool he has. He can't argue from the health perspective. Most vegans can't. There's no, because there's not enough to go off of. Can't go off of environment because there's no proof of it. Like, experimental, repeatable factual proof. There's nothing. There's nothing out there. But you can look. There are thought experiments, there's hypotheses, there's things like that, but never something as so concrete as to put it into practical experimentation with all the requisite controls. So, there's no evidence of that being true. So, that leaves with morality. And that doesn't necessarily help either. Not when you're using things like the name the trait. It doesn't help at all. But something as stupid simple as sentience could destroy it. The argument itself, not the overarching argument from a philosophical standpoint as far as veganism, as far as how does it put it? Goddess puts it, the ideological principles of veganism. Which, of course, I've asked repeatedly what Goddess defines the ideological principles of veganism, and I haven't gotten much of an answer back. So, I mean, if anybody watching this wants to put what they believe the ideological principles of veganism are, please apply to the comment section. Oh yeah, don't forget, vegans, especially you guys from Isaac's Discord server, don't forget, from me to you, go fuck yourselves. Don't forget to downvote, and I mean, you can't really unsubscribe if you've never subscribed, but you can subscribe and then unsubscribe, just for shits and giggles. Okay? That's all, just fuck it, right? Don't forget to leave a nasty comment. That's very important. Love it when I see those. But other than that, I'm out of here, guys. I've got shit to do, and it doesn't involve you guys. Anyway, for everybody else, hasta la pasta.